If you have ever read a business book, there is a good chance you have encountered the Book of Five Rings. It was written by the most famous swordsman in Japanese history, Miyamoto Musashi, who is said to have fought more than 60 duels and never lost a single one. Here is where that number actually comes from. Not a government record, not a witness. A stone monument built 9 years after Musashi died, paid for and written by his own adopted son. That does not mean the number is false. It means we should look at where it came from before we repeat it. This is the real Miyamoto Musashi, the duels, the myths that grew around them, and the man who helped build his own legend before anyone else could. Musashi was born around 1584, most likely in the Harima or Mimasaka region. Even his birthplace is disputed between competing local traditions, which tells you something about how thin the contemporary record actually is. What is agreed on is that he grew up outside the established sword schools of his era. Japan's major dojos operated like family businesses, with certified lineages, formal students, and social status. Musashi had none of that. He learned from his father, a minor martial arts instructor, and from there was largely self-taught. At 13 years old, by his own later account, he challenged and killed a traveling swordsman named Arima Kihei, using nothing but a wooden staff against a real blade. Whether every detail of that story happened exactly as later told, a violent self-made adolescence is consistent with everything that came after. Musashi did not inherit prestige. He had to manufacture it, one fight at a time, against men who already had it. For most of his adult life, Musashi had no lord, no stipend, and no fixed home. He may have fought at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, likely on the losing side. The record here is thin enough that historians disagree on the details. What is better documented is what came after. A long, violent campaign of challenges against Kyoto's most prestigious sword school, the Yoshioka. He defeated the school's headmaster in single combat, then the headmaster's brother, who tried to avenge him. Then, in the final and ugliest match, the school sent out its last heir to lead the family name, a boy backed by a group of armed students in what many accounts describe as an ambush rather than a fair duel. Musashi arrived early, broke the ambush, and killed the boy. The most celebrated sword school in Japan never recovered. This is the part the legend tends to soften. Winning against armed men who came prepared to cheat is still winning, but it does not look like the clean, honorable duels of popular memory. And Musashi's own account of these years, written decades later, does not dwell on the details either. He was, by his 30s, one of the most feared and most friendless swordsmen in Japan. The duel everyone actually remembers happened in 1612 on a small uninhabited island off the coast near Shimonoseki. His opponent was Sasaki Kojiro, a renowned master of a longsword style said to be at the height of his fame. The two men agreed to meet and settle, once and for all, who was better. The earliest records of what happened are short. Musashi won. Kojiro died. Almost everything else you may have heard, that Musashi arrived deliberately late to unsettle his opponent, that he carved an oversized wooden sword from a boat oar on the way over, that he mocked Kojiro before the fight began, comes from accounts written well after both men were dead and grew more detailed with each retelling. There is also a less flattering tradition, preserved in some regional records, suggesting that after the two men fought and Kojiro was wounded, other men working with Musashi finished him off, which, if true, was not quite the pure single combat the story is usually told as. We cannot fully verify either the flattering details or the unflattering ones. What we can say is that the island took a new name that day, Ganryujima, Kojiro's island, named for the sword style he died defending, and that the duel that made Musashi's reputation immortal is in its specifics mostly legend built on top of one confirmed fact. A man was alive, and then he was not. For the next 30 years, Musashi kept moving, dueling occasionally, teaching a little, serving briefly and informally at the edges of a few noble households, but never securing the kind of stable, well-paid position his skill should have guaranteed. Only in his late 50s did he finally settle, taken in as a guest advisor by the Hosokawa clan in Kumamoto on the southern island of Kyushu. Respected, but never a great lord's chief retainer, never wealthy. Musashi died in 1645 and had no children of his own. His adopted son, Miyamoto Yori, arranged for a stone memorial to be built in Kokura in 1654, 9 years after his father's death. That inscription, known today as the Kokura Hibun, is the earliest surviving source for the specific claim that Musashi fought more than 60 duels and was never defeated. It was written by a devoted son honoring his father's memory, for an audience that would never fact-check it against anyone who had actually been there. This does not mean Musashi was not extraordinary. The Yoshioka school did not fall because of a legend. Sasaki Kojiro did not die because of a legend. But the specific number, 60, undefeated, is a memorial claim, not a court record, and it deserves to be treated as exactly that. In his final 2 years, Musashi withdrew to a cave called Reigando in the hills outside Kumamoto to write. The result was The Book of 5 Rings, not a memoir, not a list of victories, but a compact treatise on strategy, timing, and the nature of combat, written in plain, unornamented language by a man who had spent his life being underestimated by people with better lineage than his. He died in 1645, sitting upright in a formal position, apparently from illness rather than violence. A quiet end for a man remembered almost entirely for how he might have died fighting. 3 centuries later, a serialized novel by Eiji Yoshikawa took the bones of the legend, the boy who killed a master, the wandering Ronin, the island duel, and turned them into the fully formed spiritual hero most people now picture: calm, enlightened, invincible. That novel, more than any single historical document, is why the modern world knows the name Miyamoto Musashi at all. None of this makes him a fraud. It makes him something more interesting. A man who was genuinely, violently good at staying alive in a world that offered him no other advantage, who wrote his own account of it near the end, and whose son made sure the number was carved in stone before anyone could argue about it. The sword was real. Some of the duels are uncertain, and the count of 60 came from the one place counts like that always come from, the people who loved him, telling the story after he could no longer tell it himself. If this story was worth your time, subscribe. Forgotten Japan tells the stories that the famous tales of samurai and shoguns leave out.